You know that feeling when you grab a cheap security gadget off a marketplace, set it up, and then spend the rest of the week scrambling because it can't hold a password or keep the network stable? I've been there, and that regret is what makes me pause before I hit buy now on anything that promises protection without proof. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. And today we're going to see whether the Infosec E4 Pro One 3000 actually feels like a smarter purchase or just another gamble. First off, the biggest hesitation most of us have with a device like this is whether it lives up to the hype without turning into a paperweight. The Infosec E4 Pro One 3000 lands in a crowded space of security appliances, many of which either overpromise on enterprise features they never use, or underdeliver on the basics like reliable connection and straightforward management. I spent a couple of afternoons pulling the box, plugging it into a test network, and walking through the initial configuration wizard to see if the onboarding experience respects a busy IT schedule rather than demanding a week-long training seminar. The setup process felt surprisingly lean. The device powers up, flashes a simple status light, and the web-based console appears within a minute. No need to hunt for obscure driver files or command line hacks. For a small office that wants to add a layer of authentication without hiring a specialist, that instant accessibility is a real time saver. In a real-world scenario, I used it to protect a shared printer and a handful of Windows workstations in a co-working space. Within an hour, each user was enrolled via QR code, and the device started enforcing a two-factor check before anyone could access the printer. The whole thing felt like it was designed for people who know enough to appreciate security but not enough to want a PhD in cryptography. Now, where the value truly shows up is in the hidden trade-offs. The E4 Pro One 3000 isn't a massive rack unit with dozens of Ethernet ports, nor does it claim to replace a full-blown firewall. Its sweet spot is a single-point authentication gateway that can sit on the edge of a small LAN. Because of that, the hardware footprint is tiny, about the size of a router you might already have on your desk. That means you can tuck it behind a monitor or mount it on a wall without dedicating a whole rack. The downside? If you're looking for a device that can handle high-throughput VPN tunnels for a 100-person office, you'll quickly find the throughput limits becoming noticeable. In my test, moving large files over the protected segment introduced a few seconds of latency, which is fine for authentication but could be a bottleneck for data-heavy workflows. Another practical strength is the way the E4 Pro One handles firmware updates. Instead of forcing you into a manual download and risking version mismatch, the device checks for updates in the background and offers a one-click install. That auto-maintenance model is a blessing for admins who don't want to schedule nightly reboots. However, the trade-off is that the update schedule is tied to Infosec's release cycle, so you don't get the rapid patch cadence you might see with open-source solutions. If you're operating in an industry where every 0-day matters, you'll need to weigh that slower rollout against the convenience of hands-off updates. Who should consider buying this? If you run a boutique consulting firm, a creative studio, or a small retail shop where a handful of devices need an extra layer of protection, the E4 Pro One 3000 hits the right note. Its easy enrollment, compact size, and low maintenance make it a practical upgrade over password-only access. It also works nicely for home labs where hobbyists want to experiment with multi-factor authentication without building a full security infrastructure. On the other hand, if you're managing a mid-size enterprise with dozens of remote sites, multiple subnets, and a need for deep packet inspection, this device will feel like a piece of the puzzle that's missing a lot of the pieces. In that case, you'd be better off looking at a dedicated unified threat management appliance that can handle the scale. The practical weaknesses become clearer when you start testing edge cases. Because the device focuses on authentication, it doesn't provide granular policy controls for network segmentation. That means you can lock down access, but you can't easily carve out separate VLANs for different user groups directly from the console. In the co-working space test, I had to rely on the existing router's VLAN features to separate the admin machines from the guest machines, which added an extra layer of configuration outside the E4 Pro. Also, the device's indicator LEDs are minimal, just a single status light, so troubleshooting a failed authentication attempt requires diving into the web console logs, which can be a bit opaque for someone who isn't comfortable reading event timestamps. From a value perspective, the headline specs you see on the Amazon page are intentionally modest, but the real money is saved in the time you don't spend on onboarding and ongoing maintenance. The device's price point sits comfortably under what many small businesses